neighborly manner, 24/7, 365, or 366 days a year, depending on whether it's a leap year or not. This is History Hefner in my traditional dressing gown, my smoking jacket, and my usual surroundings. A little hot today, but I'm roughing it in my jacket and hoping to give you a quality hour or so where I answer all of your questions related to history and social studies, as we do every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Sundays is our live stream lecture, and we have a topic lined up for you this coming Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so I hope you really enjoy that. We have long-form content that drops on this channel every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Last Monday, I plugged my Memorial Day video, so please go watch that if you haven't already. It was the first long-form video that I ever set up and did on this channel. And today I am going to be doing a compilation of my Roman emperors. We did the Julio-Claudians, the Flavians, and the adopted emperors, so you're going to learn about the crisis of the 3rd century and all of that good stuff, so I really hope you enjoy that as I compile my short series on the Roman emperors into long-form videos for you guys to enjoy. So that'll be debuting today at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so go check that out. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy history, social studies, the vibes, the sound of my voice, the dressing gown, the chat, whatever it may be. I am here to personally and intentionally welcome you to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. We're so glad that you could join us here for our Q&A, Ask Me Anything we have every Friday and Saturday, as well as our live stream lectures on Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. And what else? If you feel so inclined to support the channel, you may join and become a member. We're going to be doing there's always early releases on shorts for members, as well as there will be specific shorts and videos that are only for members that will be dropping on the channel. We also have live streams and private chats and fun stuff like that going on. And if you wish to donate here on the chat to help the channel grow, I would really, really appreciate that. Anything helps as we look to allocate whatever funds we can to continue to provide quality content, better lighting, a better studio, better technology, everything we need to make history more enjoyable, more friendly, and more of a neighborly feel for all of you. Gaiahan, a longtime Friendly Neighborhood historian, is here. Hello, happy Friday to you as well. For most of you, it's Friday. For some of you, it's the early morning hours of Saturday. For some of you, probably basically just Friday and Saturday around here, but welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Whenever you're watching this, these live streams are recorded and always uploaded on the channel afterwards, so you can always go and watch them and check those out. So for the next hour or so, I will be answering all of your questions related to history and social studies. And shameless plug, I'm drinking Crystal Geyser. I am not one of their partners yet, but I hope to be one day. And the way we're going to get monetized and have ad revenue and sponsors and all of that great stuff is if you like and subscribe. And to become a Friendly Neighborhood historian like Gaiahan is, all you have to do is like and subscribe. It's as easy as that. And again, we live stream every Friday and Saturday for an hour where I answer all of your questions related to history and social studies. And then Sundays is our live stream lecture where I present you a particular historical topic. And we've been doing the live streams for about a year. The channel has been extant ever since February. President's Day weekend is our birthday. We started President's Day weekend of February 2023 and 2024. So we've been at this for just over a year. And we really have been excited with everything we've been able to accomplish. It's really been an incredible ride. So thank you so much for all of your support. You are the ones that make this channel go. You are the Friendly Neighborhood historians. I'm not. I'm just presenting the history to you. So anyways, if you have a question, topic, or comment related to history, social studies, humanities, geopolitics, past and present, geography, politics, whatever it may be, drop it in the chat and I will answer in a timely manner. Gaiahan is asking, did the Russian Orthodox Church go underground during the atheistic reign of Stalin's Communist Party? Did it almost die out completely, or did it thrive underground and rebound after the fall of the Soviet Union? It'd be hard for any organization or institution, especially one as storied and historical and integral to the culture as the Russian Orthodox Church, to survive, to thrive when it was underground. Obviously, there were Christians who were able to practice their Christian faith, usually the Orthodox Eastern faith, in Russia. During the time of the Soviet Union, and at certain times it was harder for them to celebrate their faith than others. So definitely when Stalin cracked down on the churches in the Grand Purges, when Lenin seized much of the wealth from the churches in the early 1920s, there was a defrocking of many of the ministries and processes and orders of the Orthodox Church, where they basically had no, relevance. The state did not recognize them. They lost all of their power, wealth, and prestige. And that led to the church basically going underground. It didn't really thrive. Obviously, a lot of people recanted their faith and joined a more materialistic, atheistic vision, which is what the Soviets definitely wanted, a more secularized society. But at the fall of the Soviet Union in the 1990s, many throughout the Western world were impressed to see that there was a large contingent of Eastern Orthodox that were either practicing their faith secretly or very ready to take up the cross once again, quite literally in this case, as the Russian Orthodox Church has become one of the biggest symbols of Russian life. It is integral to its culture and its history. And if you like learning about Russian history, like and subscribe and become a friendly neighborhood historian, because we talk about Russian history all the time. My emphasis, my master's is in Russian history. So my PhD one day will be in Russian history, fingers crossed. And you can check out our current series we're doing on Russian history, and you can learn the story of how Prince Vladimir the Great brought the Orthodox faith to Russia in the 10th century, and how Eastern Orthodoxy, Byzantine Orthodoxy, has been so such a big part of the Russian story. So go check all of that out. Hello, welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. Thank you for joining us. I'm not sharing my religious perspective. Somebody was asking me about the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Soviet Union, and how it persecuted that church during its tenure as the head of state for the Russians in the 1920s and 30s and 40s and so on. And Rizzler, this is my job. So yes. And Rocco, I can answer any question about any type of history. So if you care about a particular type of history, ask it. It doesn't have to be Russia. That's just my emphasis. Okay, Turkey, Greece, fantastic. It's interesting, the dynamic between those two countries, which obviously have a very checkered and storied past. Free Palestine from who? I always like to ask that. Tyler, hello. Thank you for joining us again, and happy Friday to you as well, Daniel. And this is the Q&A. We do a Q&A, Ask Me Anything, where you can ask me about any historical topic you would like every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern, we have our live stream lecture. So the first two live streams of the weekend are always Ask Me Anythings, and then Sunday is when you can join us for the lecture. Yes, Eric, I'm not worried about anyone with that, but still, I like to address anyone who's not being completely rude. Good guess, but that's not my name, Morox, so yes. What you say, Free Palestine? I just say Free Palestine from who? Because obviously it's not just the Israeli occupation, it's also free them from belligerent terrorists like Hamas, so I'm big on that. Ukraine, big history. Sengiz, if you like to learn about Ukrainian history, check out my series on Russian history. I talk a lot about the Ukrainians, the Kievan Rus, obviously a fascinating and storied people with their own history that is not fully part of the Russian canon, but is quite interesting. What do you think about Erdogan? I don't know a huge amount about him. I know he's kind of assumed more than just being a president. He's kind of become the dictator of Turkey and is one of the most powerful Turkish rulers in the last century. No one since Mustafa Kemal Ataturk has had this kind of influence over the Turkish people. In the very way that Ataturk, Mustafa Kemal, was a president but also pretty much a dictator, that's how Erdogan has kind of ruled over Turkey. He's been in power for more than 2 decades. So how has clothing evolved in the West? Obviously, you have the collars of Shakespeare's day and stuff like that. You have bodices that you see this stereotypically that make women basically push up their bosoms and make it very hard for them to breathe, stuff like that. That has definitely evolved, and it seems like in the last century, formal attire has become suit and dresses, whereas before there were long gowns, and there seemed to be a change in men's neckwear, where the typical regular tie, necktie, has become the standard over the last century for how men will dress in a formal occasion, which I love to dress up, so I'm very familiar with that. What's my favorite monster? Probably Dracula. Love Bram Stoker. Fantastic stuff. Yes, Hamza, I'm exactly that. Just watched Master and Commander the other day, and I'm currently obsessed with the Royal Navy Age of Sail Exploration Age. Great movie. Yes, and it's a great series. I believe his name was Patrick O'Brien is the writer of that original series. So most historical movies or TV series, Flags of Our Fathers, Band of Brothers, those are all actual stories that happened that have been codified and written in nonfiction and historical fiction accounts that are then edited and remade for movie, the stage, or television. So check those out. No, I don't think Mustafa Kemal was a bad dictator at all. I think he's one of the most important people in Turkish history. Without him, Turkey would have fallen into an abysmal state of subservience to Bulgaria and Greece. But Mustafa Kemal, with the Treaty of Lausanne, was able to get the Turkish a stronger foothold over their land, over the peninsula where Istanbul was. Obviously, I believe it was him who commissioned it to be renamed Istanbul. You can't have a modern state of Turkey without Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. I've talked about him a lot on the channel, and I basically see him as the George Washington of the Turkish people. Interestingly enough, Turkey as a nation, as a people living as a nation state with the Turkish people living in there, has only existed for about 1,000 years. Probably a little less than that even. But Turks really didn't occupy what was called in ancient times Anatolia until around the 11th century with a group called the Seljuks, and then eventually the followers of Osman became the Ottoman Turks, which were one of the most powerful empires in world history. Probably the most underrated empire in world history at the same time. I'm gonna go with the gorilla. I'm not, oh, Henry, they're not removed from your shorts. I sometimes re-upload the short if I want to fix something, so that's why it's removed. I never remove comments from a short. I support people who want peace, democracy, freedom, all of those good stuff. It's the American in me, I guess. Smokeless powder and firearms. Interesting. I don't know a huge amount about that, so I'm trying to remember. I've read a little bit about it, but I don't know a huge amount, and if I don't know something, I'm just going to say it. What would you do if you were forced to dress in a dress? Sachet and show it off. Let me see here. Do you drink with your pinky up? Only when I drink tea, which interestingly enough, my birthday was recently. A lot of people like to know my personal data, like how old I am, what religion I am, all of that kind of stuff. And I try to keep it as private as possible, but I got a samovar, a German samovar, which is a German version of a Russian, Turkish, Iranian, Persian creation. And a samovar is basically not just a kettle, but a kettle with an attachment where you can actually mix the tea leaves and the water and the different flavorings and spices that you want and make your own tea. So I have a German version of that, and so I've been drinking a lot of tea. Green tea is extremely healthy. Oolong. I have friends who are bringing over Thai tea at some point, so I'm trying to diversify my tea repertoire, and yes, I am trying to drink with the pinky up. What do you think about the political situation globally as of today? Do you think we are on the verge of nuclear war with all the multiple wars going on? I think the closest we got was the threat of the Russians using tactical nuclear weapons. I think they may resort to that if the United States really does basically just abandon any sort of peace talks and just let the Ukrainians and Europeans go wild, which is what Trump is indicating that he wants to do. Obviously, India and Pakistan, it was the first war officially in history where both sides were fully nuclear capable, and that was really, really scary. The Pakistanis were not nuclear capable in the 1970s when they fought over Kashmir the first time, so they didn't become nuclear capable until 1998. So that carries that potentiality. If Putin were to invade a NATO country or to use a tactical nuke in Ukraine, that would facilitate a world war. Let me see. How are you so well versed in the study of time? I love history, I have a good memory, and I just combined the two of them. So thank you, Morax. I'll take that as a great compliment. You know the Monument Kiev football soccer players C-Star. I do not know that, but I'll have to look it up. They're a football club from 1942. Lord Palmerston was better than Churchill. That's a hot take if I ever heard one. Let me see here. Thank you, but my birthday is already passed. I don't like to say exactly when my birthday is, but I gave you a good indication. Yeah. I don't actually know why it's done like that, Hugh. So I would be happy to learn that. Dominic, you could stop. Let me see here. Let me see. Just give me a second, guys. Okay. Sorry about that. Marker, hello. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Let's see. What's my color? I think you can figure that out. Can you make me a mod to clear up all this crap in the chat? I'm almost about to, because it's all over the place right now. And we don't have Harry, we don't have Hars, we don't have Rodolfo, we don't have M, we don't have any of our typical moderators that typically hold everything down, but whatever. I fear that Americans using nukes again would justifying it later on. Indians and China have a no first use policy for nukes. Interesting. We'll see. I mean, the United States, if it used it, would definitely try to justify it as much as possible. I actually do, and maybe this is a controversial hot take, especially nowadays, but I actually do think that it was actually retroactively probably the right decision. It's not a right decision, but the least worst decision for the U.S. to use the weapons, the atomic weapons on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. It was obviously a horrifying and terrible experience that showed the absolute catastrophic end the catastrophic worst end and side of the technological and scientific revolution. But the alternative might have easily been a long, drawn-out war in Japan that would have led to the deaths of millions of Allied soldiers and Japanese soldiers and civilians that the United States was not prepared for, that the Japanese were not prepared for, that the Soviets were not prepared for, that the British were not prepared for after a war that had already been raging for years. So, favorite period in history? Let me see. That's a good one. I love the 19th century. I love 19th century European history. So if I could be in a French cafe going to new Renoir exhibits, that would be heaven for me. So if three Nazis are sitting at a table and you sit with, how many Nazis are now sitting at the table? Two. I cancel out one of them. And I would never sit with them anyway, so it's probably going to stay three. Pakistan is a terror country with nukes. That's a common Western idea that to usually have an inclination towards India because Pakistan, that's where Osama bin Laden was killed in 2011 and one of the most controversial decisions a president ever made that his own vice president opposed, by the way. The history of the Osama bin Laden killing, although an incredible achievement for the Obama administration, is not without its own controversies. But after years of believing that Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda, was in Afghanistan, where he was originally from, he was actually hiding in Pakistan in a compound, and that's where he was killed. So there's always been this question about the Pakistanis and their allegiance to the West and how much radical Islamic terrorism has influenced their government and their way of life. Obviously, you have Benazir Bhutto, who was the first female Islamic leader in history, elected official prime minister of Pakistan, who was assassinated in a horrible way. So Pakistan does not always have the cleanest history by Western standards, but obviously it's not like India's hands are clean in this affair either. I've heard the UK went into World War III with the largest navy. What made the USA industrialize and build up an even bigger navy? Was it Pearl Harbor? Gayahan, great question. There's a very famous story of a man named William Marshall, who was an American colonel who was recommending that the US beef up both its Air Force and Navy in the 1920s, or else they would be attacked by Japan in Hawaii at Pearl Harbor within 20 years. Incredible visionary, amazing prediction, and it came true. Obviously, the buildup of the American military-industrial complex starts in 1940 when President Roosevelt approaches the leaders of GM and Ford and all of these motor companies and says, hey, I want you to start producing military equipment for planes, jeeps, and tanks. And they started doing it, and they just cranked it out. The U.S. won that war. I call it World War III, and so does Gayahan, and many friendly neighborhood historians do. You may call it World War II, but I think there's been 3 world wars. The U.S. won that war, not because it had better technology or tactics, although the tactics are arguably better than the Germans with people like Rommel and Patton and how he aced Rommel in North Africa and stuff like that, and Douglas MacArthur's island hopping in the Pacific. But the United States was able to outproduce at such a massive rate the Germans, the Japanese, and the Italians. So the UK had the greatest navy in the world, and after being decimated in many ways, being an island right there in Europe, the British Navy was not what it once was, although it was still pretty powerful. What do you think the most important single day in history was? Ooh, that's a tough one. So many important days in history. There are days that shape history for sure. June 28th, 1914, Franz Ferdinand is killed. That forces the world out of this idealism of the 19th century and into the brutal reality of modernism with the coming of what you call the First World War, what I would consider to be the Second World War. July 4th, 1776 is obviously extremely important, although the British certainly didn't think so then. You've got April 14th, 1865, when Lincoln is shot and changes the trajectory of the post-war world, which has led to so many problems in America since then. 9/11 was obviously huge. It's hard for me to pick a single important date. I'm thinking from a Western perspective. Think of September 11th, 1686, I believe, when King Jan Sobieski was able to defeat a Muslim force of the Ottomans who were challenging Vienna, and that probably kept the Habsburgs in charge of Austria and kept the Holy Roman Empire going. That's an extremely significant day. I think it's 1586. And that victory elevated the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, but also stuck in the craw of Islamic psychology. So retribution for September 11th and 1586 came with September 11th, 2001 for al-Qaeda, believe it or not. And happy Friday to you, Shuriken. Great to see you. And if you're enjoying what you're hearing, guys, consider liking and subscribing, dropping a chat or a topic. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, where we bring you history in a friendly, neighborly manner. This is our weekend Q&A, Ask Me Anything. I have them every Friday and Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. So drop a comment, a topic, and if you're enjoying what I'm discussing, like and subscribe and ask any questions you would like regarding history, social studies, and the like. So America did so many wrong decisions. Now they are doing wrong again and again. Yes, Churchill said it best. Americans will always do the right thing after they've exhausted all of our options. Goncho, hello. Marty, hello. Jesus' crucifixions is arguably the most important historical day, I'd say. That's up there too. I can't slap a date on that. But obviously, even if you're not from a religious perspective, which is perfectly fine, the crucifixion of Jesus, the birth of Jesus is how we orient our calendars, whether you use BC AD or BCE and CE. And obviously his crucifixion was the beginning that sparked the Christian religion's biggest central theology, which has shaped the entire Western world and much of the Eastern world as well. So obviously that's a big one. Even if from a non-religious perspective, you have to see the weight of it. Even if you don't believe Jesus lived, even if you're an atheist, that day is obviously one of the biggest in history. Do you think the greatest savior, Xi Jinping, will save EU from U.S. fascist theological dictatorship in the 22nd century? No. I like that too, but I also like the turn of the century America. That's great. Yeah. The Gilded Age. A lot going on there. Thank you for joining us from Brazil. We've got people from Brazil, South Africa, Canada. Share where you're from. I'm so glad to hear all of the great places that you come from all over the world. We had somebody from Israel, someone from Greece and Turkey. Really incredible. Hey, Jamie. What about Red? Thank you. Yes, Jeff. And thank you for Amazon. I appreciate Prime. This is a 19th century smoking jacket brought back by the British to keep their civilian clothes from getting pipe tobacco on it when they would smoke pipes. I am not Muslim. I do not share my religious beliefs. So in other words, I may very well be Muslim. You do not know. I believe Friday is the Muslim holy day. Friday is the Muslim holy day of worship. So did I just come from mosque? I don't share my religious beliefs, but I'm very open to all religions and no religions coming and joining this channel and liking and subscribing. What I'm saying, India is not clean in the sense that India and Pakistan have had a back and forth, and it's extraordinarily hard when you are fighting with an opponent's side, even if you have some of the moral factors on your side, not to do things that are morally questionable. It's certainly the case with Israel and Palestine. Regardless of whose side you're on there, you have to admit that one side has obviously acted, both sides have acted immoral at different points, and to some extent you have to agree with that with any war. Ukraine and Russia, even the United States in what you call the Second World War, what I consider to be the Third World War. You have Dresden. You could argue the firebombing of Tokyo. You have horrible events, the internment of the Japanese. And despite the U.S. clearly having the moral advantage and being the good guys, as hard as a concept as that is for many historians to grapple with in our postmodern era, it is true that the United States did terrible things during the war, but that doesn't mean that Tucker Carlson is right, that Winston Churchill is bad. It just means that it's hard for any side fighting a war or a military conflict or a border dispute to not be at fault, even if it's in the right to the large degree. And oh geez, I don't want Kanye to share anything. Do you think the German painter made it to Argentina? No, Mengele did though. Joseph Mengele did. Thank you, Laxman. I appreciate that. I do believe I have a nice voice. I really appreciate that. But you don't have to yell it out. When somebody does all caps, I just think they're screaming. So, the 7 Years' War is arguably the First World War. Thank you, El Porio. I absolutely agree, which is why I consider the Great War to be World War II and the Nazis and the Japanese to be World War III. U.S. failed war with Vietnam. Yes, one of the biggest blunders in U.S. history was losing the Vietnam War. From studying both perspectives of that war and everything that went on, either the U.S. was totally involved in winning that war, or they were totally involved, or they didn't get involved at all. This middle ground of kind of waiting to win the war really didn't work, and it was a Pyrrhic victory with Henry Kissinger in the Paris Accords of 1973, and 2 years later, the North Vietnamese violated the treaty. So, and there are a lot of trash messages, but I'm a free speech absolute, so what can I say? Yes, Lark, please tell me how my history is fake. And yes, famous one, that is Sarajevo's assassination. That's when Franz Ferdinand was killed, 1914, one of the most important dates in history. Why is Chechnya not using the Ukraine conflict to seek independence? they've been pretty defanged by the Russians for the most part, and Putin has really whipped them, the Georgians and the Crimeans, and the Ukrainians are worried he'll do the same. The day we drop the nuke, change everything. Yes, that's very true, Corey. Free Palestine from who? Much love. Thank you for joining us from the UK. I really appreciate that. Let's see. Birth of Christ is obviously an important date. Trying to catch up with the chat here. If you have a question or topic, I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Let me see here. The Romans were blacks. That's not true. No, an absolute lot, Blue Monster. Bad. You don't have to yell your comments in the chat. From Poland, that's pretty cool. I love Poland. People are telling me to shut up that I'm from Poland, shut up that I'm a Zionist, shut up that I'm this or that. This is what happens when you try to be objective and fair, which is the job of a historian. We tell the truth, but people don't like the truth. Many people have been called a Nazi. Would you sit with President Trump, Musk? Steve, that's a great question. I would sit with basically any world leader. I think it would be a great honor to sit with any world leader. As much as I would be happy to sit with President Biden, I would sit with President Trump. Or President Erdogan, who I spoke about earlier, or Netanyahu, or Mohammad Abbas. These people are extraordinarily important in the range of history and geopolitics that is developing in the 21st century. We will not be able to talk about the history of the 21st century later on without understanding who these men were, what they wanted, and how they acted. And so it would be an honor as a historian and someone who studies geopolitics for its historical relevance to sit with any world leader. So hopefully, if you have a question about history, a topic about history, drop it in the chat. This isn't just a place to rant about your political perspectives, but thank you for joining us. You don't have to yell your comments in the chat. Can you go over Andrew Jackson's presidency? Let me see. Someone was asking about Andrew Jackson's presidency. So Andrew Jackson has been the president who is most often compared to Donald Trump, best known as Old Rough and Ready. He is the American general who won the Battle of New Orleans, violated basically any treaty he made with the Native Americans, banished them from many of their lands, stole a lot of their lands, and was responsible for the death of about 25% of the Cherokee race when they had to leave from Georgia in the Trail of Tears to the Indian Territory in modern-day Oklahoma. Jackson is the president on the $20 bill for no other reason than he started Manifest Destiny, and the idea of American individualism basically skyrocketed and took off during his time. The best thing Andrew Jackson did as president was paying off the U.S. debt. Other than that, his presidency was actually an economic and domestic disaster. Just ask the man who succeeded him, Martin Van Buren, who has one of the worst presidencies because he didn't know how to deal with the mess Jackson gave to him. So, let's see here. Yeah, Daniel, you're probably right about that. Famous one. It's Istanbul right now. I go with Constantinople. Why don't we just call it Byzantium? That's the original name. That's why it's called the Byzantine Empire. Everyone, basically at the beginning of history, basically everyone was from Africa to some extent. I do agree with that. Yeah. Let me see here. Let me see. Going through the chat, just a bunch of trolls, just a bunch of people being trollish and ridiculous, so people are getting put in timeout now. Let me see here. What's your favorite civilization or empire of all time? That's a tough one for me to pick. I love the Russians. That's what I study the most. That's what the history I've studied the most, and probably my favorite, so it'd be the Russian Empire. You can check out my series on the Russian Tsars. It's a short series. I also have several videos on Russian history, and of course I have my most recent series where I'm just charting all Russian history, and I just did a video about Prince Dmitry and the rising against the Mongols. Let me see here, going through the chat. I am from the United States. Let me see. And yes, thank you, Kevin. Like the live and subscribe for more, although it's absolutely crazy in the chat. Let me see here. Okay. Loose. Where did you get your melanin from? Yes, we all know, Lark. Thank you. I don't disagree with you. The leading historian, even the Jewish ones are against what the state of Israel is doing. Yes, there is definitely some things to be against there. Not saying, yeah. Let me see here. Yes, the comment rate is going to be awesome today because people are going absolutely crazy. And I love Russian classical music, Moshe. I love Rachmaninoff's piano work. I love what Tchaikovsky does. Yeah. Let me see here. Blue Monster, you don't have to scream your perspectives and you don't have to be mean about that. So we can, what do you think Nazis Why do you think Nazis will be against Japan? The Nazis were for Japan. What they didn't believe them. They were racially equal, but if you look at the way the Nazis and Hitler himself fought about different nations and areas and empires, he was impressed with strength and militarism. And thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate that. That's so nice of you. Yeah, but basically, and the Nazis had no affinity for anyone who was not military, either of their race or militaristic and proficient. So that's why he admired Mussolini and the idea of fascism. That's why he admired Imperial Japan and all of that great stuff. So they weren't. So they admired the Imperial Japanese because they were militaristic. And if you look at the Japanese, they had very messed up views about race and ethnicity that were extremely concurrent. The way they treated the Filipinos and the Chinese is comparable in some ways to the way the Germans treated the Romani Gypsies and other Slavic peoples who were very close to them ethnically, but they considered to be far inferior. A lot of people focus, obviously, with great importance on the Holocaust being the loss of 6 million Jewish lives, but 5 million Romani Gypsies, the Slavic peoples, homosexuals, communists, and people who were considered to be mentally disabled were killed. And so the Japanese did similar things with Unit 731. If you look at Japanese POW camps, the Death March of Bataan, what the Japanese did at Nanjing, it doesn't get as much attention, but there's a reason that Hideki Tojo was executed for what the Japanese military did in the second, what I call the Third World War. Yes, the Aryans are refer to a group of people who have migrated all throughout Europe, Turkey, and all the way to India. So there is some relation between many of the Europeans and even Indians. They're the Indo-Aryans, as they are called. Did the Trojan War actually happen, or was it all Homeric poetry? Octavia, that's a great question. And Steve and I am not Jewish, but thank you. I take that as a compliment. Homer, the writer of the Iliad, was the ancient Greek poet who was famously blind. Obviously, most histories of the ancient world, including things like the Gospels, embellish their stories with mythical, legendary, and miraculous events and the intervention of God or the gods. And so it wasn't uncommon what Homer was doing. He was writing history, but it is very much historical fiction. You have the intervention of the gods like Aphrodite. You have Achilles' invincibility, except that his mother dipped him in the river Styx except for his heel. So those sorts of things are obviously embellishments. Did these actual people live, and did they have any impact? Hard to say. Some of them probably did. There is some record and ideas of a king named Agamemnon and Menelaus. Troy was an extremely powerful city in Anatolia that the Greeks eventually destroyed, and their walls were very highly impenetrable. But the existence and the imperviousness of someone like Achilles probably greatly exaggerated, if not totally made up. And obviously, you probably didn't have a Prince Paris and the stealing of Helen of Troy. It was probably much more that the Greeks, especially the Mycenaeans, who were the earliest Greek civilization, which were a series of, which relied on sea trade and sea warfare and piracy to some extent, along with some of their Grecian allies, raided and destroyed the city of Troy in the 12th century BC. So, and yes, I'm going to support anyone who likes and subscribes. So if you want me to support, like and subscribe. I support human decency and goodness. So stop asking me to support Israel or Palestine or India or Pakistan. I support good human beings, and especially those who love and enjoy history the way that I do. So Kurdistan is Aryan is asking about Kurdistan. Kurdistan is an unrecognized area that supposedly belongs to the Kurdish people who have been pushed around throughout much of modern Middle Eastern history and are looking for their own autonomous land to this day. I wouldn't say the Japanese were worse than the Nazis. You don't have an 11 million person genocide, Rockstar, but you do have far worse POW camps, horrifying experiments, just like what Mengele did at Auschwitz-Birkenau. And and it's kind of under the radar because Japan is non-Western, and Japan is an ally of the United States, and Japan didn't commit the Holocaust. Japan didn't do all of those things, but the atrocities that Japan did in the war itself are horrifying and put Dresden to shame. They put many of the German war crimes to shame. It was more of what the Germans were doing behind the scenes in their war that was obviously awful. Nobody talks about Italy. Italy was the first to use chemical weapons on the Ethiopians, and that's why many people believe the war actually starts in 1935 when Haile Selassie is removed from power and the Italians take Ethiopia and the British go in and fight back. eventually during the war. So yes. Yeah, the POWs in the Japanese camps were just awfully treated. So, hello, and if you're going to type in the chat, please try to type at least in Latin characters in an alphabet so that I can translate or at least have it in English. So, yes, that's true. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor under the auspices of ending the American embargo that they had put on. This was because the Japanese had seized and occupied French Indochina, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos. And the Thai people, the Thai government, allowed them to go through Thailand to attack British Singapore, Malaysia, and the Dutch settlements. They eventually took over Indonesia. Interestingly enough, the independence movements in Indonesia, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam all began as a retaliation against the Japanese settlement of those lands and the goings on of the war. But once the Germans kicked the French out of power in France, the Japanese sensed that the weakness of the French Empire and seized most of their lands in the East Indies and Southeast Asia. Can you talk about Selassie's battle with spearmen against tanks? They won. I don't know much about that, but I've heard something about that. Selassie is an incredibly brilliant and brave individual. He stood up in the League of Nations. He was one of the first to condemn fascism and militarism, and was basically given back power and then thrown out and executed in a communist coup in the 1970s. Juniad, hello. And if you're enjoying what I'm talking about in the history of Haile Selassie, Ethiopia, Japan, Southeast Asia, again, we talk about history of all kinds here. It's not just Western American history. Please like and subscribe. I am an American. If you're wondering where I'm from, I'm an American. I don't hide that. But yeah, even so, I like to learn about history of other societies. And the United States would be a lot better off if it knew the histories and cultures of other regions of the world. And that's why I'm trying to help my fellow countrymen understand that even more. Interesting. Yeah, Islamists. So we have people from Pakistan. We have people from East India. That's fantastic. The East Indies, yeah. They're called the East Indies, by the way, because the West Indies, as Columbus misunderstood them, were the Caribbean. So the Dominican Republic, Haiti, which the old island of Hispaniola, Cuba, the Virgin Islands. Yes. FNN, I do my best. I'm sure you're a great person too. Assuming there wasn't a war in the 1940s, how would decolonization happen? I don't know. One of the biggest cries for decolonization by people like Gandhi and Mandela was that the Western societies and civilizations had failed in their mission of civilizing these areas they believed to be inferior. Their societies have brought about horrifying destruction and devastation through both world wars of the 20th century. They had no grounds to stand on, like they were morally, technologically, and civically superior to the Africans or the Indians. That was one of the big moral cries of decolonization in the 1940s and 50s. The growing influence of the United States, which ostensibly believed in self-determination and also hoped that if they extended the olive branch of democracy to places like South Africa, Kenya, India, Myanmar, and other areas, that these areas would embrace democracy, embrace the West, and embrace capitalism, when they'd all come to resent it against the chafing against the British and French empires, was horribly naive. But it was also to stop the Soviets from spreading communism. Socialism and communism were popular because they were seen as non-Western. So, I don't know about Battle of Wickham Anchorage. My favorite battle, ooh, that's a tough one. I love Austerlitz. I love Napoleon just taking everyone by surprise. I've heard that, Bale. That's partly true, but not fully true. There are 10 million slaves today in Africa itself. The African slave trade has not fully ended, and when you throw in human trafficking, slavery might be more populous than it ever has been, unfortunately, at least documented in human history. I don't know if it's proportionally, but it's pretty bad. And thank you. Good Geek, I'm hoping to get more and more, so please like and subscribe. That is how we help the algorithms. If you want the channel to grow, if you want me to get better tech and better equipment and better everything, consider a donation or joining or getting some perks or stuff like that. A shout out will be referenced, all of that great stuff. Like Kevin helped me out earlier. Thank you so much, Kevin. Herodotus or Thucydides, which style do you prefer? I like Herodotus's oral histories into a compilation. It's like he took these legends that he was sitting around a campfire and took the oral histories, which is how all oral tradition, culture, religion, and history started, and then put it into that. The ancient historical writings are based on oral traditions. Earliest histories of humanity are oral histories. So yeah, decolonization is continuing. You are right about that. And you are very welcome. If Reagan traded arms for hostage with Iran, then why is the Obama-Iran deal bad? Good question. The basic idea is that the Iranians being able to have access to nuclear facilities is obviously extraordinarily worrisome. The Reagan administration made the absolute blunder of believing that anyone with a communist attachment or sympathy was bad, and so even the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The Iranians had kicked out the communists and left-wingers in Iran who had started the revolution that had helped propel the radical Muslims to power under the Ayatollah Khomeini. So the United States was willing to look the other way, forgive the hostage crisis, to basically destabilize the Sandinistas and Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua, and that led to a disastrous scandal for the Reagan administration. A great leader once said, first I need to find out where my people are going so I can lead them there. Who was that? Yes, Sengiz, I know who you're talking about, Muhammad Ali and how he freed Egypt from the Ottomans. Fascinating guy. Taslim, tell him I said hi the next time you talk to him. Can you say that Clinton's free trade agreement with China to democratize China failed, considering where the current trade and geopolitical stances are? Yes. This is not an endorsement of Trump reciprocal tariffs or anything, but the free trade agreements with China in the past have not necessarily worked for the Americans the way they have wanted, especially in the geopolitical front, as China has not become any more democratic. Just look at what happened in Hong Kong during the COVID pandemic when all of the protests for a free Hong Kong, the autonomy of Hong Kong was shut down. So the United States opening up the door to China is not necessarily a bad thing. Free trade is not necessarily a bad thing. Clinton's ideas weren't necessarily a bad thing, but where was the teeth? Where was the backup? And where was the accountability on the other side? A lot of people do not understand that the West does have moral complaints, about China that they never actually bandy about. It's all about dollars and cents. When it comes to dollars and cents, because of the economic influence and prowess of the Chinese industries, the United States is going to lose that argument unless it takes a moral position about sweatshops, child labor, and the like, things that Western societies have banned that China still seems to embrace. So it's interesting. Let me see. Do you have a Discord? Have you heard about Sephardic Jewish pirates that attacked Spanish ships during the 1490s to the 1700s? Moshe, I've heard a little bit about that. I also know about the Barbary in North Africa. That's the one I'm a little bit more familiar with. Those were constantly attacking European traders in Western Africa and in the southwestern part of the Mediterranean, emptying out through the Straits of Gibraltar into the Atlantic Ocean. I do know a little bit about that. I don't know about the Sephardic Jews doing that. It would make sense. There's a lot of animosity there, and there's Sephardic Jews in North Africa and Spain. I do not have a Discord. I probably should get one, but it's good to see you, Moshe. What do you think about India tariffs? I don't know much about them. It's just this broad brushstroke by the Trump administration in order to turn back the economic clock. So, ethno-guesser, what do you mean? Either Israel or Argentina. Are you guessing my ethnicity? Because I'll take both as a compliment. Thank you. I like anyone who doesn't just assume that I'm a pale white guy. So no offense to all the pale white guys out there. How do you feel about America supporting Israel's colonization of Gaza? So people are asking about this all in the chat. And you asked a serious question, Light, so I will answer it. The United States, Gaza belonged to Israel until 2005. This idea of colonialization would have to be neo-colonization. In the original agreement, Gaza was taken over by the Egyptians, and in 1967, in the Six-Day War, when the Egyptians tried to destroy the Israelis took back the Gaza Strip, or took the Gaza Strip. They never had it before. And then for 40 years, they occupied it. It was never under Arabic or Islamic control. 2005, it was turned over to the Gazans, who immediately put Hamas in charge. They democratically elected Hamas, who has terrorized and brutalized not just the Israelis, but their own people as well. Independent Gazans who would love independence and somehow a peace treaty with Israel have been silenced and basically crushed under the weight of the Israeli attack, which has been basically, Hamas has done nothing to stop. So the truth of the matter is, when would you call it colonization when the United States occupied Japan after World War II? They let it, I would call it World War III. They let it go soon afterwards. I know this is probably going to make a lot of people in the chat mad. I don't care. I'm just talking about historical facts from a historical perspective. Some invasion and conquest of an area during wartime is not necessarily colonization. That would not be a fair thing to call it. I do believe that the war needs to end and the United States is pulling the plug on it. And basically, The U.S. is saying if the Palestinians want a two-state solution, they need to stop. Hamas needs to release the hostages and then be disbanded, and then Israel will be okay with returning the Gaza Strip slowly but surely to the Palestinians. I have always thought that a great strategy to end this war is that Israel rebuilds the Gaza Strip. So Israel would need to temporarily occupy it. You break it, you buy it. They broke the Gaza Strip through the bombings. They have to rebuild it and make it habitable for the Palestinian people to return there, and they cannot put a terrorist organization in power once they return. That seems simple. It's not that simple for Hamas, because that would mean they lose all their power. So you can't talk about this without talking about Hamas, and Israel's continual bombing has to stop. And there has to be some sort of working out of a two-state solution from that. But it seems less likely than ever, and Israel has done a lot of damage to itself and not been its best ally. And okay, I hope you can hear me now. The U.S. is pulling back on being as big of an ally as they were in the past for the Israelis, and that probably will motivate the Israelis to quell the bombing and the fighting. That's my perspective. It's not a terrible thing to say that the Hamas needs to be destroyed, the hostages need to be released, the bombings need to stop, Israel needs to rebuild the Gaza Strip, and the Palestinians need to live in Gaza eventually, and there needs to be a two-state solution. That seems like a pipe dream, probably because it is, but it's not all Israel's fault, and it's not all the Gazans' fault. Islam is a religion of married a 6-year-old girl, and their holy books claims he is a good example for men of all ages. Bail, I would say that is technically true, and I am not necessarily going to defend Islam, especially radical Islam, here on the channel. But what's interesting is, take the Christian approach. I'm not assuming you're a Christian. The Virgin Mary was probably 12 or 13 years old when she gave birth to Jesus. It was not uncommon. I am not excusing any of it. I'm not doing whataboutism. I am saying that always be careful not to be throwing stones with a glass house. So I'm sure people have gone crazy in the chat. Hopefully Freshly, who is a friendly neighborhood historian and a subscriber, is holding down the chat and shutting down the craziness and the trolls. So thank you, Freshly. Don't you care about Ireland? I love Ireland. I love Irish history. I just did a video talking about the Irish native tongue, the Gaelic tongue, and how it has died out. I'm Irish. I love Irish history. I don't know a huge amount of the geography of Bosnia. Obviously, you have Herzegovina, you have former Yugoslavia and Austro-Hungarian Empire to the north. Bosnia is kind of in this middle ground of the different Balkan states, between Central Europe and the rest of the Balkans. So it's kind of always been in the crossroads and the crosshairs of European imperialism, unfortunately. Is genocide systematic to fascism? Where has fascism been practiced without mass killing? I wouldn't say that Mussolini necessarily, repression, militarism, and yes, the killing of your own people, the harshness, authoritarianism is inherent to fascism. Mussolini, you could argue, committed a genocide in Ethiopia. Franco did not in Spain. Franco was a general who rose to power and kind of used fascism. Estado Novo in Portugal. These were examples where they were repressive dictatorships, same with Pinochet, but they weren't necessarily committing genocide. The Nazis are actually more of an exception to the rule of fascism. I'm not saying fascism is okay. I'm saying that fascism in its moral code, in its practical application, isn't necessarily genocidal, Henry. Hello, Geek. Whenever you get tired of wearing that robe, you can send it to me. I love your vibe. Keep doing what you're doing. DeMarcus, I so appreciate that. Thank you so much. It's a 19th century smoking jacket, and it turns me into history Hefner. Henry Kissinger, basically a guy who was National Security Advisor and then Secretary of State under Richard Nixon, who's already an ominous enough character, has a lot of shade connected to him. There's a lot of controversy and corruption, and basically the U.S. being involved in the takedown and upholding of dictatorships in Africa and Central America that he is partially responsible for. The United States maintained dictatorships like Pinochet, Juan Perón, several different African dictators that their names escape me, and Noriega in Panama, and the main reason was they were anti-communist. The United States made a horrible blunder in the Cold War that hurt its international prestige, especially in Vietnam in the war, when they would appoint these dictators who were anti-communist, but they would be fascist, repressive authoritarians who didn't give a crap about their people. So, and yes, there has been no political system without death. Bail, that's sad but true. Let me see. There's a video on Israeli military history on YouTube who he says would like to offer therapy to the people who remain after the war. I consider that testimony to the control that Israel intends. Therapy isn't, I wouldn't necessarily go that far light. I think you have to assume ominous intentions for that. Peace to the Middle East and effably interesting. I would like at least the first part of that. Tareeb, great to see you as always. Good geek, friendly neighborhood historian. Alex, I appreciate it. Like and subscribe if you like the vibes we're going for. Is there a link linguistically and culturally between Arabian Semitic groups? I believe there's a link between the two due to Islamic rule of Spain for 700 years from 711 to 1492. The Umayyad Caliphate, the Almoravids, and eventually the Moors. Yes, there is. The rolling of the R's in Spanish, certain Spanish names and pronunciations, pigmentation of Spanish people being different from the rest of the Europeans is because of their connection to the Semitic, North African, the Maghreb, and the Arab world. And yes, they're the Arabs and the Jews. When you can be anti-Semitic towards Palestinians. They are technically Semitic peoples. Yeah, Gaia, Mary might have been a little older than that, but I'm saying she's definitely older than Aisha, which I understand that. I understand the complaints about Muhammad's character and personality and the differentiation between him and Jesus. I understand they're very different historical figures. My point is people who criticize Islam for that and that alone need to look at the whole picture of every religion and consider some of the facts in each religion and how they go. So it's a fair thing, but I appreciate your rebut to that. Why did the Italians turn on Mussolini and hate him and hang him? Basically, the Nazis tried to force the Italians to keep fighting and created an Italian puppet state in northern Italy run by Mussolini in the second half of the war, whereas the Italians in the south of Italy and Sicily had surrendered to the Americans. These were their cousins. The vast majority, not the majority, the plurality, the biggest ethnic group that actually went to fight for the U.S. forces in the Western theater of the war were Italian Americans. And yes, Jesse James, I do know my history there. Thank you so much. I hope you're complimenting me. The Italians love him, and they elected his granddaughter to parliament. Sounds about right. There's kind of this retroactive nationalism that's popular, Giorgia Meloni right now in Italy, and Mussolini is seen as kind of just, I don't like the idea historically that Mussolini was kind of just led by the hand by Hitler. It's not true. Mussolini was an aggressive and nasty individual in many ways. Look at what he did down in Albania and Africa. But Mussolini, like Franco, would have stayed in power had he not allied with Hitler. The reason Francisco Franco was still alive into the 1970s was because he was an anti-communist dictator who proposed to be a right-winger and buddied up with the Catholic Church, and the United States let him stay in power. And Joshua, thank you for joining us. I'm sorry, I know I'm answering your question too late. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel where we bring you history in a friendly neighborhood manner. So it's all things history, geopolitics, past and present. Drop a topic, comment, or question in the chat. And 128, Aurora. I'm doing well. I hope you are doing well as well. And I am tired. It's been a long time. I don't say my name, but I usually go by History Hefner because of a smoking jacket. Were the British responsible for the Irish famine? Not responsible, but made it worse. Same thing with the Bengali famine. Basically, the British, when the Irish potato crop was scarce, demanded and extracted large numbers of the potatoes from Ireland. It was already bad enough. It even got worse after that, which is why many of the Irish went to the United States. Dark, hello. Why did pederasty fall out of favor in the modern era when it was so common in antiquity? You're going to get me demonetized. It was common in ancient Greece for relationships between older men and younger men. And I'm not going to say more than that. It was pedagogical, but it was also sexual. What were the first and second Vienna Awards? I don't know. Anti-Semitic word Spanish. Interesting. Only you're welcome no matter what your position is. So much disinformation from you regarding the Israel-Palestine issue and the false equivalence. 200 hostages with more than 50,000 civilians killed, and Gaza was blocked from all sides fishing. Yes, that's what happens during war. The Germans had more people die than the Americans did in World War II. That doesn't make, it's this numbers game that I do not like. And there is no disinformation about that at all. I'm not making a false equivalence. I have never said Israel lost all its hostages, therefore it gets to do whatever it wants in Gaza. I did not say that. You are assuming that my position when I haven't made that equivocation, and I think it's a terrible equivocation to make, which is why I don't make it. They blocked off, you blockade your enemy. This happened in the Civil War. This happened in almost every war in history. And if it was reverse, Israel would have it happen to them. I think this is a bit of an exaggeration, but if Israel laid down its arms today, slaughter. If Hamas and its Palestinian associates and Hezbollah laid down its arms, generally the war would end. Take from that what you will, but I believe that to generally be the case. Use Icy Hot. Yes, that's true. Probably because Hamas is a terrorist organization that wants Israel to be destroyed and Jews to die. You don't give free fishing rights to people like that. You don't help them multiply. Beard, interesting question. Is America using Israel or is Israel using America? During the last couple of years, I would have said the second. Now I'm saying the former. Basically, what Trump is doing in the Middle East to basically try to bully his way to peace and prosperity and get Syria and Saudi Arabia to sign the Abraham Accords and recognize Israel's right to exist and self-determination is basically put a leash on Netanyahu and say to the Palestinians, if you want me to let him off a leash, just turn down any idea of giving up the hostages and ending this war, and saying to the Iranians, if you want stop building nuclear, don't enrich uranium, and stop this, and I will not let them off a leash. And basically, Trump has realized that Netanyahu doesn't fully want that, and he's kind of, as he has been kind of throughout this whole thing, just kind of flattered by war. So Trump is basically kind of going on his own right and not giving Israel not letting Israel off a leash. So, yes. Okay, who ruled that area before the British? What area are you talking about? Let me see. Hi, Dustin. Is there any evidence that Hitler was a Nazi? There's plenty. Blue Dream, hello. What is your favorite era for fashion? What about architecture? Ooh. I got to go with the late 19th century. I love that era. When it comes to architecture, neoclassical is really cool. American Georgian, that's really fun. Let me see here. I've been scrolling for an hour looking for something special. I hope you found it here. Let me see. When was Puerto Rico considered a colony in your view? Now, Puerto Rico was a colony when the Spanish took over in the 15th century or 16th century. Why were the Hungarians so aggressive to Romania in World War II? Are you referring to my World War II? I'm thinking you're meaning, I'm not sure, because Hungary was kind of passive during what I call World War III, what you call World War II. During the Great War, the Hungarians attacked the Romanians because they joined and helped the Russians on the Eastern Front. Why give Apollo moon landings questioned by so many people in the modern era? Because people are stupid enough to believe whatever Candace Owens tells them. Sorry, but it's just people. Here's what usually happens, and this is why people become conspiracy theorists, and we have them here on the channel. And I don't mind that. You're allowed to believe whatever you want. I don't believe the JFK assassination story to be fully accurate, and we found out it's not. There are conspiracy theories that have moved into the regular mainstream theory category, and there are conspiracy theories that are still conspiracy theories, at least by my predilection based on history. Conspiracy theories come about because people look at something that happened and can't believe the results of it because it is so shocking and earth-shattering. The assassination of Kennedy, the death of this wonderful young man in a horrible way in front of a national audience, terrifying, absolutely traumatizing to the American experience. Landing on the moon at the end of the same decade, huge in the span of the war, the Cold War, a huge victory for the U.S. Obviously, people who think the U.S. manipulated their way through the Cold War, which they often did, are going to try their best to undermine the U.S. Success there. So it makes sense. So. What is my favorite YouTube for history? I would go with History Matters. I love me some Tea Time with Lindsay if I'm going to learn royal history. And Spectrum has some great videos on monarchies in Europe. So go check those videos out. Your opinion are Verdun or the Somme? Which do you choose? Ooh. Verdun. The USA has no right to leverage violence against anyone. You mean like the Nazis and Imperial Japan? I'm doing well, Ruya. I hope you're doing well too. Japan really wasn't. The Nazis certainly were trying to develop their own nuclear weapon, Amar. Do the Palestinians have a right of resistance under international law? Yes. So did the Israelis. Let me see. Hey, Evan. I mean, most academicians agree that Israel is an apartheid state, regardless of the truth you think is, of tones of from Dumonte to Smith. I agree they have a right to exist. I agree. I understand where most academicians are. Most academicians believe there were 2 world wars. I don't believe something just because an expert told me that. And by the way, one more thing about the conspiracy theories, more and more people believe them these days because established hierarchies of people who actually know things have proven to be wrong about things. People hear something incorrect from an authority, and the authority does not correct herself or himself, which this doesn't always happen. Then there's a cover-up of that, or there's a disagreement about that. It used to be if an authority was wrong, they would come out and say it. It happens less and less, and people tend these days, rather than creating cohesive critical thinking arguments, regardless if you agree with them or not, they tend to cite this authority says this, therefore this is true, and they don't understand that that's called a fallacy called an argument from authority. An authority can speak to an issue better than most can, but that doesn't mean that she or he is always right, even in their own field. I'm a historian. You guys disagree with some of my historical perspectives. I'm not going to cite myself as an authority. Was COVID-19 a lab leak? Probably. And that was considered a conspiracy theory that has become a mainstream theory. I love how academics talk about apartheid while sitting in their cozy college campus rooms. Okay, was that a shot at me? I hope it wasn't. I'm not too cozy, it's very hot here, which is why I barely decided to wear this. JFK said, ask not what your country can do for you, but oh jeez. Michael, that's tough. Jesse James, that would be the group currently referred to as the Palestinians. Okay. Hello, Hars. You got here and it's crazy today, but it's fun and I love it. The Israelis have a right to resistance against who? Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, Hezbollah, basically everyone around them that wants them to be destroyed. And thank you, Bal, for agreeing. The 7 Years' War was indeed the First World War. Go check that out on my channel. I have a video and a live stream lecture where I discuss the 7 Years' War and make the argument, I believe quite persuasively, that it is indeed World War I. So I call World War II what you call World War I, World War II, and World War II is World War III. So the next war will be World War IV. Shuriken, thoughts on the Holodomor. How engineered was it? Many of these famines that were caused by different communist governments, like in China, Cambodia, and the Soviet Union, were highly manipulated by human activity, but there was obviously this factor where there were lower crop yields. Why were there lower crop yields? Well, when you kill off a number of peasants who are not going to go with your program, and you arrest them, and you keep them from actually working on their farms, and you tell them they can't grow anything for themselves, and they're used to doing that in order to survive, you're going to have lower crop yields. Collective farms had lower yields than individual farms and the old system. And the Russian peasantry, if you read about it in the early 20th century, had communal farming known as zemstanas that were quite common, and then were defrocked by when Stalin basically decided, nope, it's got to be what the party says, and basically it was him. And when an apparatchik is making decisions for you, which is a Soviet bureaucrat, you have lost all of your say-so and power. They would not only take away and plunder all of the resources from farms of these peasants who they believed were middle class, called kulaks, they would also wait around it for those people to starve to death. They would not allow them to leave, or they would kill them brutally. It's Muslim land, always has been. No, it hasn't. The Muslims conquered it from the Christians, who had been the Romans, who conquered it from the Jews, who were conquered by the Persians, who were conquered by the Babylonians, who conquered the Babylonians, who conquered the original land of Israel that was the Davidic kingdom, who had conquered the Canaanites. This is just common in history, the transference of land from one group to another. If you're going to make the argument that Palestine belongs to the Palestinians, that land belongs to the Palestinians because they are Arabs and Muslims have had a historical connection, your argument falls apart when you consider Israel's historic connection. They both have a historic connection. They both have a connection to the land. That's a much more easy argument. You look like a billionaire in that row, bro. One day I hope to be. Yes, thank you, Danny. I love how you're getting rid of arguments. And no, I do not know it all, Rebel Duster. Nobody knows it all. I try to know as much as I possibly can, though. The Turks ruled that area for 400 years before the British colonized that area after World War I, World War II, and since 1948, Palestinians started the violence. The Turks ruled that area. They took it over from a different Muslim group, the Abbasids and the Ayyubids dynasties. There's different Muslim states and emirates and kingdoms that ruled that region. For a century, the Christians had it back as the Kingdom of Jerusalem. That land has never been settled by one particular people for too long. The Muslims actually have the longest track record of doing that, other than maybe the Romans. Why does white guilt for slavery seem to exist, or at the very least be incentivized in the USA? Does this exist elsewhere, like in Britain? It exists mainly in the Western world. It's a Western invention to be self-critical and self-effacing of your history. Friendly History has his views. You are allowed to keep yours. Do not become argumentative. You can become argumentative. You can ask questions. I don't mind that, Hars. What I mind is when people just dismiss me without even thinking about where I'm coming from. I would never do that to someone else's argument, even if I think they're wrong. Like, Hars, you're wrong about Calvin Coolidge and Woodrow Wilson, yet I don't hold that against you. Yes, he has harmed society as a whole. Rogan is a prime example of why censorship is needed. I don't think censorship is needed. You're going to argue with the wrong person here. I let people on this channel say horrible things about me all the time on videos and stuff like that. I literally, at least once a week, go back and look at all of the comments that were on my shorts and long-form videos. I have long-form videos every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and shorts every day. And people will say horrible things. They will make racist comments or things like that. And I go back and I say, these comments shouldn't have been reported. I'm going to allow them on my channel because I'm a free speech absolutist. I believe horrible ideas need to be heard and then smash the pavement with good arguments. Hello, Andy. Jesse, okay, they're just going back and forth. I'm not going to get in the maelstrom there. I can't wait for a good American to use the Second Amendment against Trump. Wow, Dagwood. That was dark. What was the cause of the Finnish famine? I'm not sure. I don't know a huge amount about the history of Finland. Was that in connection with the Soviet Union? It might have been because of the Winter War in the 1940s. Hello, James. Dastavanya. Name a country. Oh no, this is tough. Uzbekistan. How do you define the people around Israel as? Do they occupy? Palestinians are largely the right people who converted. I don't know what you mean, Midi, but there are Jews, there are Christians, there are Muslims, there are Arabs, there are Bedouinic peoples. Palestinian is a relative newcomer compared to many of those different groups. Why is Finland not considered Scandinavia? It should be if it's not. And if you love history, join the Patreon. We have social media, X, Facebook, and Instagram. Freshly, if you could put those in the chat, that would help. What do I think of India and Pakistan war? Stop the fighting. Redraw the lines around Kashmir, maybe even redraw the boundary lines between India and Pakistan as is. Who chose you to name the next war? No one chose me. Who chose me? No one chose me. I'm doing it because I'm a historian and I have that power. Saladin took 800 years and established the land. I agree it transferred between the hands of Christians and Muslims, but what's happening now is the same as the wars when men fought. So, to some extent, Evan, but truth of the matter is Saladin took that away from Christians who had taken it away from Muslims who had taken it away from Christians. Actually, they'd taken it away from other Muslims. Interestingly enough, in the Middle East, if you study its history long enough, you will find that Islamic kingdoms, when they do not have Christians to fight, they will turn on each other. If the Jews did not exist in Palestine today, there would be continual fighting between Hezbollah and Hamas and all the other things. Then you have a right of resistance against people you occupy. When they invade you, yes. When they are threatening, it's a parasitic relationship. They are attached to each other. So of course when you are being invaded and could be destroyed by them at any minute, yes, you have the right to resistance. Was there any place for Stalin to invade Germany during World War II before Germany invaded the Soviet Union? He thought about it, but he was kind of bamboozled by by Operation Barbarossa. Do you own any historical artifacts? No, although I hope this dressing gown is one day in a museum as History Hefner's gown. Did Germany have a right to self-defense against the Polish Home Army? That's a horrible argument. The land the Germans invaded that land. They had not settled there. They had not created an area there. They invaded and took it in the midst of war. The Israelis did not do that in Palestine. Sorry. Every single war in that region was instigated for land or kicking the Jews out by non-Jewish groups. It's just absolutely true. And it was all in a reaction to Jewish settlement of that area in the late 19th century. And all Israel had to do to start the Arab-Israeli war, Midi, was to say, we exist now. What will happen in the Gaza Strip will not be restored. It's too hot and machinery will break down and they will give up trying to rebuild and it will likely turn into a paintball course. That would be horribly sad. The Palestinians deserve a right to live there. I mean, it's just not Hamas. I'm not skipping your comments. You were going back and forth, Evan. I've answered most of what you're saying. Hi, Kandra. And my theory is 100% true about the slave trade. Yes, and it existed in Arabia even before then. Muslims cannot enslave other Muslims, so they went to Africa to do it. Is the earth overpopulated? No, it's actually underpopulated. And those are the social media handles, so consider joining us on Patreon, and you can check out my First Ladies series. Let me see here. What gave you the authority? Okay, I already answered that. Let me see here, just catching up with the chat, and we're all the way there. People making facts up with no sources, like how people make random statements but do not state any sources and references, like you've done repeatedly in the chat. Jai Abbas Hawass has the power to stop inciting violence against Israel and Palestine. I don't know who that is off the top of my head. Yes. Okay, I finally caught up to the chat for once. Usually I'm way behind and not able to answer all the questions. But Steve, what gave me the authority? I'm a historian. I study this. I come up with theories. That's what historians do. My theory is there's been 3 world wars, and there's several people in the chat like Bale who agree with me, and I appreciate that. And you're allowed to disagree with me. The picture looks so much like the Hoover Institute picture. Thanks. And Ricky, hello. Do you believe in the truth and reconciliation movement for First Nations people? Yes, I do for any Native group. There has to be a moving path. That's what Charles was affirming in his address when he made a land acknowledgement. I'm not sick, I'm just tired. My chat's been going on for a long time, J-Dog, and I'm a little sweaty. It's a little hot over here, but I still wanted to put on my usual gown, my smoking jacket. Have you ever worked in research for a museum before? No, they wouldn't hire me. I do have a degree. I have a bachelor's and master's in history. How much would it cost for you to get on the floor and bark like a dog? How much do you got? Mary doesn't like the wars on the poverty, and neither does her son. I've heard that before. I don't know what you're saying. Why did South Africa have an apartheid regime in the Cold War, even though the British did not support it? The British left South Africa to their own governing devices in the 1930s, and by the 1960s, the Boers, the Afrikaans, the Dutch, this is what is actually at the root of the current controversy over bringing over Afrikaan Dutch farmers, Boers as they are called, to the United States by the Trump administration. The Afrikaans, the Dutch, established a apartheid state, discrimination, basically similar to the American South of segregation that you learned about in school, and basically tried to stomp out, even violently, any sort of resistance to that, like the African National Congress of Nelson Mandela. This eventually evolved into a movement that used nonviolent tactics and other things, and eventually with F.W. Clerk basically giving up on apartheid, white South Africans eventually decided to give political equality to black South Africans, the majority population, who elected Mandela president in 1995, soon after he had been released from prison. Or 94, he came to power in 95. Or he won the Nobel Prize, something like that. So 94 and 95. So this basically meant the end of apartheid in that region. And it was kept up because the Boers were in power, and many of in the West supported it because they felt that the South Africans, natives, were being influenced by communism. So that's how it fits in the Cold War. Thank you, Guy Han. I appreciate you saying that. That's so kind of you. Let me see. Freshly and Harsh, thank you for holding down the chat. Please show some love to my moderators. I know they came a little late today, but that's okay. They've done a great job promoting the channel and keeping people at bay since then. Who led the peace treaty? Which peace treaty? European skewed history, not Eastern history. Evan, I know a lot about Eastern history. I've studied Eastern history. Check out my long-form videos on the Safavid dynasty and Islam. I've talked a lot about the history of a non-Western world, and I pride myself on my ability to learn and grow and attain more knowledge about non-Western history. Am I a Western historian primarily and as a trade? Yes. Do I know jack squat about Eastern history? Absolutely not, especially compared to most Americans. Mossab Hassan Yusuf, in his book, Son of Hamas, he's been one of the biggest advocates of destroying Hamas. He has shown how Hamas has used the Palestinians as human shields in wars. He's been one of the biggest exposers on that. You have to give, granted, there are many people who will be willing to expose Israel's mistakes and problems as well. And some of them are in this chat. White people make up history as they go along to make the white man look good. Israelis are not white. Evan, I know you disagree with my take on Israel, and that's probably where you're getting this from. Israelis are not white. And white people have done huge amounts of damage, more damage than any other group in history. But it's not because of racism and white people being evil. It's because of technology. It was technology that allowed the Europeans to reach Africa and North and South America before any other group colonized those areas and lead to imperialism and slavery. Do you think the Holy Roman Empire would have survived into the modern era without the loss to the Protestants? No. The emperor had no political authority, and it was too divided. Corzo, can you go into the detail about the Islamic slave trade, in particular about the castration practices used by Muslims on Africans? Eunuchs were very popular in harems, such as the Ottomans did. They did this with Christian slaves they took called janissaries. They were Christian white boys who were sometimes sold into slavery by their parents, who believed this was the best way they could get ahead in their society. Completely true, by the way. I know this sounds like a made-up fiction, but it is completely true, Evan. But the truth of the matter is, female genital mutilation continues to be a practice that is common in many of these countries that have a heavy radical Islamic influence. This is not all Muslims. This is actually a very small minority of Muslims, and the biggest victims of Islamic terrorism are Muslims and have been throughout most of history. But basically, because Islam says that you cannot enslave other Muslims, enslavement of black Africans became common for Arab slave traders, and the Europeans eventually caught wind of this and got into it as well, the Portuguese being the first in Congo in the late 15th, early 16th century. De Klerk, yeah, sorry, thank you. Interesting name there, Jesus, Muhammad, Christ. The cause of, Evan, it's absolutely true. Muslims have freed many slaves. Yes, that's true. Both things can be true. Christians freed slaves. Christians owned slaves. That's the Civil War for you. If they can't peacefully get along, then cancel all business fights. Interesting. But Evan, interestingly enough, if you're going to have a criticism of the West for enslavement and imperialism, and you're going to criticize Christianity for that, then by the same broad brush stroke, you have to go after Islam for radical Islam, female genital mutilation, and enslavement as well. When is World War III happening? World War III happened in the 1940s because I believe there have been 3 world wars. The next one, the 4th World War, we don't know when that's going to happen. Hopefully not in our lifetime. Were the Dutch the original settlers of South Africa? No, they created the Orange Free State, the Transvaal region. They were there before the British, but there were a group of Africans from the Bantu known as the Zulu who inhabited it, and other groups before them. Is Morocco important in conquering the world? No, but watch Casablanca. And Morocco's beautiful and incredible. And the Spanish certainly thought it so, and the Umayyad Caliphates thought so when they conquered it in the 7th century. So, which country did you study history? My expertise is in Russia. Part of learning about Russian history for what's called the Great Game, which is what my master's thesis is on, was studying Afghanistan and Iran, Persia. So it's not like I know nothing about the Islamic world. Again, you're trying to appeal to an authority, saying that I'm not an authority. It doesn't matter. I don't appeal to authority. I don't say I'm a historian. I say I'm a historian and you can trust me, but I don't believe everything I say is right. I'm wrong about plenty of things. I've been proven wrong. People have recorrected me. I used to say Paul Revere was a blacksmith, and I said that the Munich Olympics is where Hitler showed off. It was the Berlin Olympics. Yeah. Which university did you attend? I'm not going to go into personal details. Let me see. Why did South Africa discard their new... And by the way, Evan, I appreciate where you're coming from and your perspective, and I hope you liked and subscribe, because even if you disagree, you clearly are passionate about history. And if any of you are passionate about history, agree or disagree, I consider you a friendly neighborhood historian. Like and subscribe. And yes, somewhat KYD. Latin people are not fully white. Why did South Africa discard their nuclear weapons? That's where, if we had Xander Cote here, he would be able to explain it more. They actually do have some, if I am correct. Why do Jews love money? Because Europeans love stereotypes. Israelis are white Europeans from Ukraine. You mean Israelis. You think you misspelled it because you're trying to be crude. But no, some of them are, some of them aren't. The vast majority of Israelis are actually Mizrahim. They are Middle Eastern or North African Jews. I like that, bring back Rhodesia, Henry. I've got to ask you why you think that, though. Why didn't England keep America? It depends who you ask. If you ask the Americans, because freedom. If you ask the British, they were bored. The answer is somewhere in between. They always want to attack Latinas, pulse shooting. I don't know what that is. But gaming, I'm not going to be so jejune in my answer. Basically, the truth of the matter is the English realized that the guerrilla warfare tactics of America, particularly in the southern colonies that were supposed to be British strongholds, was too much. It was costing more. They were fighting this war over taxes, not getting enough revenue. They had already settled areas like Australia, so they bid the Americans adieu. Hot question. Is it unequivocally correct to call Nazis purely evil? Surely they did atrocities, but now time has passed. Can we as historians appropriately look to things they did well? Ooh. Guyon, that's a tough question. Because I made a video where I simply said the Nazis would have let the British go, and it was taken down, even though it was historically true, because I was supposedly a white supremacist praising Nazis. Absurdity. I hate the Nazis. I think when we say pure evil, it's not that you can't possibly do anything good. It's just that all of your motives are for completely evil reasons. And I think we can still say that the Nazis were purely evil. Can you talk about the great actions against slavery that Thaddeus Stevens did in Congress? I love Thaddeus Stevens, and I love Tommy Lee Jones. I think he won the Oscar playing Stevens in Lincoln. One of my favorite historical movies, by the way. But Thaddeus Stevens basically fought tooth and nail in the U.S. Congress throughout the 1850s and 60s to not only make sure that blacks gained their freedom, but that they gained equal rights to whites. Thaddeus Stevens was one of the most progressive people of the 19th century, along with Charles Sumner. Why was Yugoslavia a limbo land between the East and the West? Because it was a amalgamation of Croats, Slovenians, Slavs, different peoples of that land. And you don't have to yell that, Hukum. Most of the current-day Israeli Jews comes from the Caucasus. They are predominantly white. The Jews that resettled that land are. But you have decades now, generations of interbreeding and different things, and you have Jews who were kicked out of a bunch of Arab lands that have now come and settled in that, from Persia and things like that, Iran. Those are Mizrahim Jews. Many of those Jews are. Now, Netanyahu is a descendant of Polish Jews, so he's a Ashkenazi Jew. But the vast majority of Jews in Israel, the majority of Jews in Israel have indeed become Mizrahim and Sephardic. So there's different types of Jews, and nobody understands that because everyone wants to just say Jews are white because white is bad. Let me see. The Europeans enslaved each other before Africans. Yes, and the Africans enslaved each other before the Europeans. It's because it's about technology. The Europeans had the technology to go to Africa. And they brought their ilk and evil with them. And the ilk and evil of Africa profited off of that. What's the First World War? 7 Years War, Joe. Fighting in 4 different continents. Go check out my video on it. I've gone 20 minutes over just to answer this because some of these questions are amazing. So I'm going to catch up to the chat and then I'm going to make some quick, simple answers and then we're going to be done. Make sure to like and subscribe. Check out the channel for more. Check out my long form video dropping tonight. And all the other great stuff that we upload here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. And enslaving people isn't connected to Islam either. Can you state where in the Quran or Hadith it states that we can take slaves? You can enslave them as long as they're not Muslims, correct? Islam does not ban slavery. Just like the Old Testament does not ban slavery. I'm not making a religious argument. I'm making an ethical one. Actually, I'm making a historical one. And if the Quran doesn't say it and the Hadiths don't say it, then why the heck did the Arab slave trade happen and continue even before and after the Europeans stopped it? Why were the British and French sending ships around Africa to stop the Ottomans from picking up slaves? Let me see here. And this is history, Elizabeth. Thank you. My man is stating history, not actually quoting where in the Quran and Hadith it states that we take non-Muslim slaves and are referring to war booty. Isn't that like the bedrock of slavery? Prisoners of war? It's actually a modern concept to free prisoners of war. Egyptian religion, thank you, Zalante. I like you being here. Egyptian religion was before God came to earth as man, after he came and rose. Okay, that's Christianity. Which is the oldest religion on the planet? Probably Hinduism. Is there a reason I always feel I mostly hear about black slavery and racism and less about white slavery and racism, or is me just not being in the know? There's a lot of self-critique of the West, and it comes from only the West. And the East is sometimes happy to indulge in it. And that's why, if you look at the radical Islamic revolution in Iran, they used Western leftists to criticize and overthrow the Shah, who was supported by the United States and Great Britain. Thoughts on the current Russian-Ukrainian war? I have an idea. Why doesn't the war end, Zelensky stand for re-election, and Putin get the heck out of power? Because he has power, that's why. Russia has a great reckoning coming for what it's done. Thank you for being a true gentleman, even with all the uneducated trolls. It's not just uneducated. People disagree. People have different facts. People have different ideas, and I just respect that, but I don't agree. I don't know who Scott Horton is, GFIN, so I'm sorry. Europeans forced the Jews to be bankers because they didn't like working with money. That's not fully true. It was that the Jews could charge interest, and excessive interest led to what's called usury, and the Christians believed they were greedy because Christians could not charge each other interest. So loans for wars, like the Crusades, which were reconquering ancient Jewish lands, ironically enough, the Jews charged interest. The anti-Semitism was hard. The feeling that the Jews had killed Christ was a huge part of medieval Europe, and that led to horrifying persecutions and terrible massacres of Jews all throughout Europe. It's an awful atrocity. Can you first clarify how FGM is connected to Islam? Because I'm not aware of it. Secondly, clarify, what is FGM? What is FGM? Who were the original Jews, and do you know? The Israelites. Obviously, asterisk, there have been alterations, intermarriages, cultural changes, syncretism. That's what happens when they've been all over the planet. That's why you have Mizrahim, Sephardic, and Ashkenazi. Putin is a communist dictator because he is like Kim Jong-un. He's a nationalist dictator. I wouldn't call him a communist, although he does have communist leanings. Richard III was the last king of England. The Tudors were not only legitimate, but they were scum. Raja, I do not agree. You have a close association with the Lancasters, but Henry VII was pretty committed to holding on to power as long as he could. Ilham, I'm not talking about religious truth. I'm talking about what religions teach and how that relates to history. Have you heard the AI translated Hitler's speeches? I have not. It sounds interesting. I mean, in a Cold War sense for Yugoslavia. I don't know what you mean. Netanyahu is the devil. Interesting. Joseph Smith ran for president versus slavery almost 30 years before the Civil War. Yes. Interesting. From the Mormon Church. And legend, this is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. This is the end. You're joining us at the tail end of our Q&A Ask Me Anything. I've gone 24 minutes over answering questions related to history and social studies. There you go. Moshe is an example of what we're dealing with. And that's Moses. That's the anglicized version. May I ask, why is that over time the Jewish population has declined in the Arab world? Because many of them were expelled from Arab countries after the Arab-Israeli War, when the Jews took not only their land, but seized Arab lands as well that were kind of disputed. Let me see. Why were the Argentinians so supportive of the Germans in World War II, and the same Thailand supporting Japan? Thailand let Japan go through them because they didn't want to be colonized. Thailand has never been colonized, by the way, and that's what kept them from being colonized. The Japanese had already taken over the rest of Indochina. The Argentinians had a large German and Italian population in them. Still do. Manu Ginobili, basketball player. Italian last name, Lionel Messi. These are Italians, but they're Argentinian. Did I just skewer where Messi's from? I'm sorry if I did. Is he Spanish or Argentinian? I'm so sorry if I skewered that. Islam is pro-slavery. In Islam, you can take a kafir as a slave. I've heard that before. King, welcome. It's always great to have royalty here. Adarsh, hopefully you are learning about history, because that's what we're doing here. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. I love that quote. Muslims are, yeah. Joshua, Christians are too, by the way. Where did European learn technology and just basic hygiene? Have they? I don't know if they even have. Did you even study Quran or Hadiths, bro? Don't presume without reading it. I am saying what the religious practice is in practicum in history. I do not need to read the Old Testament to tell you that there was the Davidic kingdom. I don't. And yes, that's true. The New Testament does not ban it either. There's, I think, something. So I'm basing this off of text, but also off of historical realities. Why is propaganda thought of as truth? Because people love to just quote an authority, believe it's true, and then just go with it. This is what I was talking about with conspiracy theories earlier. When that authority is proven to be wrong and to have lied, people start to doubt, and it really gives conspiracy theories a lot of fodder. He's basing his views about Islam on the actions of the Ottomans. The Ottomans, and the Ayyubids, and the Umayyads, and the Abbasids, and the Safavids, and the Mughal. There's a lot of caliphs. There's a lot of emirates. You need to really check out my content on Islam. I'm not as ignorant as you think I am. The Old Testament bans slavery. It says, if you steal a man, you shall be stoned. It's more of indentured servitude, but it is slavery. Because slavery is a catch-all term applied to a bunch of different practices common in the world at that time, including indentured servitude, including prisoners of war, and yes, including chattel slavery. Why does the medieval period classically end with the fall of the Byzantium? Because Byzantine scholarship and learning influenced the Renaissance. The Age of Exploration was a way to get away from Ottomans, so they went westward instead of east to trade, because they didn't want to deal with the Ottomans anymore. So that's a couple of reasons. And Byzantine learning and ancient texts influenced the Renaissance. So if does this mean that Islam advocates this behavior? There's a difference between one Islamic person doing something bad and an entire system that's built on it. You don't enslave millions of people without a system. And I'm not saying all Muslims. I literally just said it's not all Muslims. I love this. I love that. Yes, people violating a religion don't necessarily mean that religion is invalid. But when the practices of that religion are consistent in many of its forms and incarnations throughout history, questions need to be raised. That's true for any religion or any cultural belief. Is the assassination of the Tsar in the 1860s worse for world history than Guy Villero Princip killing the Duke? Joe, you're thinking of 1881, Alexander II? Yes. He would have liberalized Russia, turned it into a constitutional monarchy, and there probably wouldn't have been the Bolshevik Revolution and no Soviet Union. So, Joe, yes, I agree with you there. People of Poland and Prague admitted that they don't like Putin either. That sounds about right. America wants to bring back manufacturing at low price, it must employ prison labor. That would actually not be a horrible idea. Pay off almost like indentured servitude. What do you think will happen to France after the Sahel countries? I don't know. Yes, Russia holds all the cards now. Okay. Hi, Cyril. Was it racist when dark-skinned blacks sold light-skinned blacks? No. Slavery never started because of racism. Race wasn't part of it. Culture and economic gain. It took on a racial context in America where it was justified because of slavery, even after the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal. Yes. Let me see here. And thank you for subscribing, Moshe. I appreciate it. Hello, Pizza. Why has 1285 Islamic terrorist attacks happened between 2011, according to a Florida investigation in European countries, if Islam is so peaceful? I don't know. Ask someone else. Someone like Sean, who is also a streamer on here. Be happy to debate anyone, Evan. I kind of feel that when you have to say that you're going to demand that I debate someone else, that you're not doing a good enough job to actually debate me properly, and you're not doing as well as you'd like to think. So I will take that as a concession that you do not know enough and I need to debate someone else. Thank you, Evan. I'm not trying to be snarky. I'm just saying you've been very staunch about what you're saying, and then all of a sudden it's go and debate someone else. You don't know that I would be wiped. I wouldn't be wiped. Well, the floor wouldn't be wiped with me in a few minutes. I might be. I don't know. There's tons of things I don't know, but I'm open to learning. But I'm saying that there's a consistent historical message that I'm saying, and I don't think I've contradicted myself. Evan, he has his opinions because he's a moderator. What if religion are not real? Would it be safer to follow philosophy or not follow anything, and that would not follow any ideology, religion, or ideas generally made up to? That's assuming that religion is the cause of ideology. No. Look at Marxism. Is slavery practiced in the current Christian lands? Not any that I can think of. Maybe. Let me see here. Trying to catch up with the chat. Yes, a bias combo. Yes, Ilhan. I have a bias. Everyone has a bias. You have a bias. I know your bias. You know mine. Amazing. I'm a historian who's asked questions. Of course I'm going to show my bias. When and why did control of the Islamic Mecca transfer from the Hashemites to the Saudis? The Saudis were given the power over the Arabian Peninsula by the British in 1932, and oil flowed. Yeah. There you go, Bale. There's definitely criticisms in all religions, and I've criticized Judaism and Christianity for some of the same things and reminded people who want to criticize Islam for some of its inconsistencies to be careful. Specifically, how they were removed from power and what took place around them. The Moors were destroyed in 1492 when they lost the Emirate of Granada. The Muslims who were in Spain were then either exiled, expelled, or put under the Spanish Inquisition and brutally murdered. The Moors lost their control over Spain. They were the descendants of the Almoravids and the Umayyad Caliphate that had originally conquered Spain, aka Al-Andalus, in the early 8th century. Thank you for asking, Evan. I'm happy to share knowledge about Islam if you're happy to share it as well. Let me see. What's your religion? I don't share my religious views. I say I believe in God. I don't go beyond that. I know Finland is not the true successor, but I want to learn more about Finland. It's the happiest country in the world, technically. I don't know. I don't want full of debates. I've got a lot of questions and a lot of opinions. What's your opinion on bringing torture back as a punishment? Enhanced interrogation is the fancy way to say we're going to torture people and we don't care what you think. Not a good idea. It didn't work. Waterboarding didn't work. First Jews were black, and the people inhabiting Israel are not true Jews, but imposters. No. Let me see. The KKK are Christian. This should not reflect on the entire religion and its teachings. You make sound points, though. Yes, absolutely, Lee. I absolutely agree. And the same way that radical Islam should not necessarily reflect all of Islam, especially when its biggest victims are Muslims. The Ku Klux Klan was... I can agree with you that it was a Christian organization, at least ostensibly. Not saying the Nazis were Christians... never been true. Yes. Thank you, Niffin. That's so sweet of you to say. It's my pleasure to have you here and share your views and hope to change my mind as I hope to change yours. And I don't hope to change anyone's mind. I hope people are just learning and enjoying this. The Decembrists weren't socialists, but they were proto-revolutionaries. And Joe, you have a lot of knowledge about Russia. I appreciate you. Let me see. The female can be scholar? Absolutely. Hello from Russia, Milwaukee. Breaking Bad. Oh, Walter White's here. Great. And hi. Let me see. The FBI considers an act of slavery when an 18-year-old takes a 17-year-old girlfriend across the state line. Yeah, that's kind of a very tight definition. This man have no clue about anything. He is making me chuckle about his views on Islam, which is why he is still here and participating in the chat and even arguing with my moderators. But Evan, I'm glad that you came today. And with that, I have gone a half an hour over because of the scintillating different conversations and topics brought to me by friendly neighborhood historians with great questions, like Evan, like Ilhan, like Baal, like Hars, like so many other people. Make sure to show love to Hars and Freshly, by the way, for holding down the chat and doing such a great job. We had a lot of people here who enjoyed their time together, and I hope you enjoyed and learned something. And Amar, I appreciated your questions. Ovia, I appreciated yours. Let me see. Yeah, why were there, I've got a couple more questions, I'll answer them just because we've been having such a great time. Why were there so many dictators in the East? Were they afraid of a revolution? Somewhat. There's a different understanding of power and power structures and geopolitics in the Eastern world and the West, and the United States learned this the hard way with Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm sorry, Evan. I hope you come back and that we get to talk, and we get to talk more, because I think that you share a lot of different ideas and I disagree with a lot of them, but we both are sharing history, and that's what I appreciate that. Thank you, Ilham. I'm glad you had such a great time. Agree to disagree. And Vera's debate whether or not Christopher Columbus was Jewish or not. I believe it's inconclusive. What are your thoughts on this debate? It's actually come in. He was Jewish. It just came in just before last Columbus Day. Interesting. So, please like and subscribe if you haven't. Oh, Alfeo's here. I'll answer a question for Alfeo. Where were there black slave owners in the United States? Yes, about 3,000 of them from the founding of the nation to the beginning of the Civil War. William Ellison, look him up. Former slave, became a slave owner. Let me see here. Slavery of the mind is worse than slavery of the body. Probably true. All right, with that, Evan, I thought you were leaving. But thank you for sharing that. The real history was erased by Europeans burning books. Only partially true. It would be more accurate to say the real history was erased by Europeans writing books, to some extent. So the white people didn't show up until white people didn't show up until the 1700s. I love how you make a conclusive statement that's just completely historically erroneous. Yes, it is true. Human life emerged from the Fertile Crescent and Africa, not Europe. I know that. I'm not stupid. But that doesn't mean that there were no white people until 1700. Yes, to some extent, Joe, that is true. All right. Just wanted to spread some love. You're so gorgeous. And thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. That's where we'll end today. I'm gorgeous. You're gorgeous. Gorgeous people, have a great Friday. Enjoy yourselves. And I will see you tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we may continue this. We may go another route, but you get to ask anything you'd like about history and social studies. Check out my long-form content dropping later today. It's not going to drop at 5. I'm sorry, guys. It's, 5 Pacific? It's like 8. It's like 7:44 right now. Not going to drop. I'm sorry. But I'm going to get it out in the next hour or so. And yes, John, join the channel. You can follow me on Instagram or on Patreon. I really appreciate that. Oh, sorry, John. Oh, John, you got me. That was hilarious. And Christians did burn plenty of books. That is absolutely true. And so has every religion, to one extent or another. What would be your message to the world? Like and subscribe. I hate to be trite, but yes. So, thank you. Join if you want to join the channel here, become a friendly neighborhood historian here on Patreon and support us. You can. I hate to say that sheepishly, but yes, that helps the channel grow and all of that. Liking and subscribing helps too. I really appreciate that. And Kevin, thank you so much for your donation. And like he says, like the live, subscribe for more. Yes, and I appreciate all the friendly neighborhood historians who have liked and subscribed. There are plenty of other histories. We've talked about them a lot here on the channel, and I'll talk about them more tomorrow. Questions you may have, I'm going to have to hold off on. Join us tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to get all of your questions answered. I went 40 minutes over, so this is a smoking jacket, by the way. Yes, and I did. I feel very, very smooth. I'm going to take that as a compliment, Curtis. Make sure to like and subscribe. See you guys all tomorrow and Sunday, our live stream lecture, 4 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, asked. I will be sure to go and read those. Take care. Have a wonderful Friday and Saturday. And remember, love history. Bye-bye now.